So yeah, this is not what my talk was called on the meetup group, but I just want to assure everyone that it's the same talk, and I also just realised when I saw it on the screen that I've basically set everything in all caps, so I'm really sorry if it seems like I'm yelling at you for the next 15 minutes. I'm not. It's probably not a good thing to have at a sort of mental health week event. But yeah, rest assured I'm not yelling. Mandy kind of did it for me, but hello, my name is Kylie, and I put that slide in there just so I could get the sparkles in there. I am not a mental health professional, just to get that out of the way. What I am is a designer, and I'm a designer at a local agency here in Perth called Humaan. When I'm not designing, I also do a lot of stuff. So I volunteer for community groups, some sporting groups, some environmental groups. I help organise a conference called Mixin. I also skateboard with a local women's-only skateboarding group. I mentor students. And I also strangely have a lot of very smart entrepreneurial friends. And on top of all of this, I also have a mum who thinks not only am I her daughter, but I'm also her 24/7 tech support. And so I get requests constantly. They range from the standard to the obscure. And so you can just imagine with all of this stuff that I kind of do, my work, my mum, and the fact that I'm a designer and the fact that I am, I guess, kind of relevant to the things that surround me and I can provide some value through the skills that I have, I get asked to do a lot of things. And this is okay, because I actually really do enjoy helping people. It's the way that I find I can provide people with a signal that I care, or that I'm invested in what they're doing, or I believe in what they're doing. It's also a way that I can, a lot of the time, add a lot of value to things, to people in my life. So, for example, the community groups, the sporting group, I don't actually sports. I just design the marketing material for the sporting group. But I guess with all of these good things, with every kind of good thing, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing as well. And it can get sometimes get just a bit too much. So what happened is a couple of years ago, I was kind of doing all of those things that I talked about all together. Usually one or two things would drop off, but at this particular time I had everything all at once. Everything was happening. And what I was finding is that I was just overextending myself way too much. I was saying yes to anything that sort of came through my way. And what this meant was that I had no time to do the things that I wanted to do for myself. Suddenly I would find myself, on the weeknights, doing hours of like random little favours for people and pushing everything that I wanted to do for my own well-being to the side. And so what I did was, I did what any person does. I went to Google and I asked Google, how do I fix my life? Not in those exact terms, but along those lines. And what I found is that a lot of articles that told me to, actually, I'll go back to this. This is the other point that I was going to make, is that when you just say yes without any intention or without any consideration, what I like to call this is that blind yesing causes stressing. So I just keep that going over in my head. And so back to, I guess, where I was at in terms of finding help or figuring out what I wanted to, how I could fix this problem. I found a lot of articles that just told me to just say no. Stop saying yes to things and say no. Put yourself forward. Put yourself first. And this is good advice, and it'll pop up a bit in my talk as I go along. But what I felt was that it would actually take away from the way that I would provide value to my community and the way that I would feel good and feel happy about, I guess, my existence within my sphere of the things that I do. So quite ironically, what I decided to do was just say no to saying no. And instead, what I would do is I would say yes, but I would say yes with a bit of self-care. And what I mean by this is I would say yes with intention. I would say yes with considerations. I would just make sure that if I wanted to do something, it was not going to impede on my own well-being, and that I was able to continue on and take all of this stuff on and not be overworked. And this, I guess, really brings me to the core of this talk, which is I want to share with you a process that I have kind of come up with through trial and error over the past 2 years that really works for me. It allows me to say yes with this kind of self-care. And I think it's really important to note that this is just what works for me. And in this context, everyone is, kind of different. So for some of you in this room, you could probably take my process and apply it to your life, and it could work. For others, this might just be an example of how you can kind of come up with your own process to apply to your life. I know that sounds really weird and robotic to say about your life, but having these kind of steps and processes in place can really just help you, I guess, make good decisions for yourself. So the best place to start with this is for me to kind of set a scene. I'll use that scene to kind of go through the different steps that I take. So imagine this. I'm at dinner. Dinner's done. It's late in the evening. Kylie's off in the corner picking at the leftovers. Paula and Jeremy are having a fight in the corner. And I'm in the corner over here chatting to an old friend, Simon. Simon and I are just catching up. What have we been doing? Have we done anything interesting? And then all of a sudden, Simon will stop and he'll say, "Hey, Kylie, you're a designer, aren't you? I have this logo that I've been working on, but I'm not really happy with it. Could you take a look at it and maybe provide me with some feedback, or maybe even offer up some suggestions?" This is a really good time for me to pause and just hold that scene in your mind. And this is where I guess I initiate my process. And so step one of that process is to qualify. And what qualifying means for me is I ask that person who's asked me to do the thing to send me an email. The reason I ask them to send an email is because it helps separate the serious requests from the flippant requests. So you'll often find that the people who are really serious about what they're asking you to do, they'll take the time and they'll take the effort to write an email. If it's kind of like off the cuff and they're just in the moment, you probably won't get an email from them. So what I would find in the past is I would randomly just say yes. So imagine Simon, I'd be like, "Yeah, sure, Simon, I could do that." And the next day, if I've got some spare time, I'd whip up, I'd look at his logo, or I'd whip up something that I thought would work. And then I would send it back to Simon, and Simon would go, "I don't even remember asking you for that," or like, "Oh, I don't actually need to do that." So just, remembering that sending an email just puts that barrier in place that helps you, I guess, separate the different requests. And the interesting thing is that some email, but most don't. And so immediately you've regained a lot of your time without even really doing anything. So what happens if Simon actually emails me? If the next morning I check my inbox and he's really keen and he's sent me all the details and I've got all the information I need? Well, I decide. All things aside, I look at the request and I ask myself a really simple question. Is this something that I want to do? Most of the time, it is something that I want to do because usually I'm asked to do things that I actually enjoy. There are some times where I don't want to do things. So say, for example, Simon said to me at that dinner party, "Hey, Kylie, can you create an infographic that breaks down in all the ways that Buffy is better than Charmed?" I would definitely say no to that. So by deciding, by asking this question, I decide if I want to do it, if I don't. If I don't want to do it, I just say no. And this is where those people who say no have a point, right? You can just say no. And saying no can look something like, "Sorry, I can't help, but all the best." And that's enough. Like Fee said, that's enough. So a lot of people have this fear about saying no because they think they need some grand explanation as to why they can't do a thing. Simply because you don't want to do it, or you don't have time, or you think that it's going to stress you out, is enough of a reason to say no. So what happens if I do want to do it? Well, I just sit on it. I don't tell Simon yet, and I just sit on it. And I move on to the next step, which is to schedule. And what scheduling involves is looking at my calendar and finding time where I can schedule the thing that I've been asked to do in places where I haven't set aside time for myself and for my own priorities. So for an example, this is kind of what my calendar looks like. It's cleaned up for clarity's sake, but essentially what all the coloured blocks are, I guess, things in my life that I want to do for myself. So I've even got things like sleep, because if I don't put it in my calendar, I probably won't do it. Time for passion projects, which is like hobbies and things that I want to learn about. Sometimes the passion project is just sleeping in. I've got things like commute, exercise, what I want to do after work. And all of the white bits and all of the bits that aren't coloured, I guess, is free time that I have to dish out if I want to. And so I will put things in that I get asked to do in those spots. This is probably a lot for a week, but just to point out all the different places I can put them. And you can see that there's one spot where I'm kind of in this lunch area where I have a task. And I put this in there because I know that my time is flexible in my lunch and I can do some things if I want to. So if a friend asks me, hey, can you review an article? I know I can just read that over my lunch break and that's fine. But the point here is that I understand my time enough to know that I can do that. And so what if I can't find any time for it? Or what if I just don't want to give up any of my time? I just say no. This is the reason why I don't tell the person that I can do the thing straight away, because I need time to actually look at my calendar and separate myself from my instinctive reaction, which is usually to just say yes straight away, and use this as a secondary kind of qualifying method. So then, once I have scheduled it in, what I'll do next is I'll communicate. And basically what this means is telling Simon that I can do his thing and when I can do it. And this can go one of two ways. The first way is that I say to Simon, hey Simon, I can do your logo next Thursday. And Simon says, cool, that works. And I say, success. The second option is that I say to Simon, hey, I can do your logo next Thursday. And Simon says to me, that doesn't work. And I also say, success, because what that means is I've got my time back. And so once we've gone through that process and everything is locked in, what do I do next? I forget it. So I put Simon's little task in a little box labelled Thursday, and I put it in Thursday next week, and I don't touch it until Thursday next week. And what this helps me do is focus on what I have in front of me today. What I used to do in the past is just say yes, like I said, and what that would mean is something would come in and I would say, sure, I can do that. Then I would drop what I was doing, and then all of a sudden this thing has taken me 4 hours, and then my whole 2 weeks is blown out, and this would mount and mount and mount and mount and mount, and this usually just gets way too stressful. So this has been really important, I guess, in my journey of self-care when it comes to this sort of thing, this forgetting, this being able to put it aside until I actually need to get to it. And so when it comes to next Thursday, what I do is I finally do the task. And I'm ready to do it because I've scheduled it and I know it's coming up. And then if anything else pops up within that task, I repeat the entire process again. So if Simon all of a sudden needs me to look at a website, then I'll go back right to the beginning and I'll go through the entire process. And so just to recap, so my steps are to qualify, to decide, to schedule, to communicate, and to forget. I didn't do the task in there because I kind of just want to keep it at 5 because 6 is a weird number. And the results of doing this kind of thing for myself, what have they been? Well, I have more focus, I have more time, and I have more me. And what I mean by more me is that I'm doing more stuff for myself. So I am helping people and being actively involved in the people around me and the community groups I'm part of and fulfilling that part of my personality, I guess. But it also means that I'm taking care of my own priorities. It also means that I've got less anxiety, I'm less stressed, and I also have less guilt. So I'm not worrying about what's coming up or if I have enough time to do everything I've said I would want to do. And I'm also not feeling guilty because I'm putting myself last, and that was a massive thing for me. I would feel guilty even though I was actively doing it. There's just a few things before I wrap up that I just want to note, and this is where I am quite comfortable, I guess, giving it as advice. It's very helpful to know your priorities. So knowing your priorities could be that you know that you want to focus on work, or that you have a hobby, or you want to learn CSS Grid, or you just want to sleep more. And if you don't know what your priorities are, I would encourage you to kind of take some time and try and figure out what they are. And you know what? A priority could be just figuring out your priorities. It's really meta. And so when you know your priorities, it helps you understand your time. And I like to think about time like moving house. You don't know how much stuff or how much time you have until you put it in boxes. If you don't know how much time you have, how are you going to decide what you can and can't do? You don't really have any idea. And what time does is time helps set natural boundaries. You not having enough time to do something is enough of a boundary to say you can't do it. It helps you from overextending yourself. And yeah, this guy. The second is to do nice things for nice people. And this is not as fluffy as it sounds. Earlier when I said that there would be one of two kind of outcomes, I lied. There's actually a third. And the third is that you could say to Simon, hey Simon, I can do your logo next Thursday. And then Simon could get really shitty. Simon could demand that you do it now, or that you change your schedule, or just get really annoyed. If this is the case, this is a sign of someone just not respecting your boundaries. And if someone doesn't respect your boundaries, it's probably a person that you probably don't want to help anyway. And in this case, no sweat, just say no. And the last thing that I want to touch on is to enjoy it. So when I kind of figured out that I needed to figure out a way to deal with all of these kind of incoming requests, I was obviously met with those articles that told me to just say no. And it made me kind of feel a bit weird about doing the things I did. It made me feel weird about being who I am. The best thing I did is kind of put that aside and not listen to that, and really live in the fact that I enjoy helping people, and I enjoy giving my time out to people and causes that I believe in. But, like this whole talk is about, just remember to look after yourself. Thank you. That is my talk. I made a flowchart, and you can find it on my Twitter. I'm going to tweet it now.